The Thompson mansion glowed brightly in the darkness of the October night. Darnell Thompson had never been one to skimp on large celebrations, and his 62nd birthday was no exception. Garlands wrapped around the white columns at the entrance, and fountains quietly trickled on the lawn in front of the house. Inside, about 50 guests had already gathered: business associates, neighbors, and a few relatives. Malik Thompson stood by the large fireplace, sipping whiskey from a crystal glass. His dark suit fit his athletic figure perfectly, and his tie was tied with mathematical precision, a professional habit of a lawyer. He watched the front door closely, noticing out of the corner of his eye how his father was accepting congratulations from the guests. Aisha Williams Thompson appeared in the doorway surprisingly late. Darnell's stepdaughter was usually the epitome of punctuality, but today something had gone wrong. Her emerald dress accentuated her slender figure, and her high heels made her seem even more fragile. Walking beside her was Jamal King, a tall man with short hair and the attentive gaze of a pharmacist accustomed to noticing details. Malik felt a familiar tension in his chest as their eyes met across the room. Aisha quickly looked away, but the color on her cheeks betrayed her excitement. Jamal couldn't help but notice the fleeting exchange, though he pretended to be busy talking to a passing waiter. "Finally, you're here!" Darnell's voice boomed across the room. The host, dressed in an expensive tuxedo, made his way over to the new arrivals. "Aisha, dear, I was afraid we'd have to celebrate without our star guest." Aisha smiled, offering her cheek for a kiss from her stepfather. "Sorry, Dad. My shift at the hospital ran late." "Interns always work long hours," Jamal remarked gently, putting his arm around her waist. His fingers tightened slightly when he caught Aisha's quick glance in Malik's direction. Darnell patted Jamal on the shoulder. "You're taking good care of her, son. You know, I always said Aisha needed someone stable and reliable, not like some people." His gaze slid to his son, who was still standing alone by the fireplace. "Dad, don't start," Aisha whispered. "I wasn't going to," Darnell said, raising his hands in a conciliatory gesture. "It's a holiday. Malik, son, come join us." Malik slowly approached the group, feeling the tension grow with each step. When he was next to them, Aisha took a tiny step back, as if afraid of being accidentally touched. Jamal noticed this movement too. "Happy birthday, Father," Malik said, raising his glass. "To your health and prosperity." "And to the family," Darnell added, looking at the three of them. "To our unusual but strong family." They clinked glasses, and for a moment there was silence. Aisha nervously adjusted the bracelet on her wrist, a gift Malik had secretly given her a week ago. Jamal noticed the jewelry for the first time. "Nice bracelet," he remarked. "Is that new? I haven't seen it before." "Oh, yes," Aisha stammered. "It was a gift from a colleague at work." "A generous colleague," Jamal muttered, examining the expensive piece of jewelry closely. Malik looked away, pretending to be interested in a painting on the wall. His fingers turned white from how tightly he was gripping his glass. "Gentlemen, please take your seats," announced the maitre d'. The guests began to move toward the dining room, and Malik took the opportunity to move closer to Aisha. "We need to talk," he whispered when Jamal walked away to greet some acquaintances. "After dinner, in the library." "Malik, no." Aisha shook her head. "This is crazy. Jamal already suspects something." "5 minutes," he insisted. "It's important." She hesitated, biting her lower lip, a gesture that always made Malik's heart beat faster. At that moment, Jamal returned, and without saying a word, put his arm around Aisha's shoulders and led her back to the table. The look he shot Malik over his shoulder was full of suspicion. The atmosphere at the festive table remained tense, despite the abundance of champagne and delicacies. Darnell gave a touching speech about family values, glancing from time to time at his son with ill-concealed disappointment. At 32, Malik was still single, which in his father's eyes was an unforgivable mistake. "Take Aisha as an example," Darnell said, gesturing with his fork. "She's younger than you, but she's already settled down. She has a career, a stable relationship." "Dad, please," Aisha blushed, feeling Malik's knee accidentally brush against her leg under the table. "I just want to see grandchildren before—" Darnell trailed off, sighing dramatically. Jamal listened to the conversation with growing interest. He had long noticed the oddities in Aisha's behavior, but had dismissed them as stress from work. Now, watching the invisible dance of glances between her and Malik, he began to piece together a frightening picture. After dessert, the guests dispersed throughout the first floor. Some smoked on the terrace, others danced in the living room to jazz music. Malik slipped unnoticed into the library, hoping that Aisha would follow him. He didn't have to wait long. The door opened quietly, and Aisha entered, looking over her shoulder. In the dim light of the library, her silhouette seemed even more fragile. "Malik, this is the last time," she whispered. "We can't go on like this." "I know." He took a step toward her but stopped when he saw the fear in her eyes. "Believe me, I don't want this either. But there's something you need to know." "What?" "I got the test results." Malik hesitated. "I have—" The door suddenly swung open, and Jamal appeared in the doorway. His face was contorted with anger and pain. "So that's how it is," he said through clenched teeth. "Now everything makes sense." "Jamal, it's not what you think," Aisha began, but he raised his hand to stop her. "Don't bother. I'm not blind. Stepbrother, huh? How sweet. And how long has this been going on?" Malik stepped forward, blocking Aisha. "Listen, let's talk this out." "Calmly?" Jamal laughed. "You're sleeping with my girlfriend, your stepsister, and you're asking me to be calm?" Voices could be heard in the hallway. The guests had heard the noise and were heading toward the library. Jamal took a deep breath. "This isn't over," he promised, turning toward the door. "Let's see what your father has to say about this family affair." When he left, Aisha leaned against the bookcase, covering her face with her hands. Malik wanted to hug her, but she pulled away. "What did you want to say?" she asked in a trembling voice. "About the tests." "It doesn't matter." Malik shook his head. "It doesn't matter anymore." They stood in the silence of the library, listening to the muffled sounds of the party outside the door. Both knew that their secret was about to become the family's secret, and the consequences would be disastrous. There was a sense of impending doom in the air that would change their lives forever. Monday morning began for Aisha with a phone call. At the Cleveland hospital, where she was doing her internship, employees were required to undergo regular tests for infections. The routine procedure she had undergone 2 weeks earlier had given no cause for concern. "Dr. Williams-Thompson, this is Margaret from the lab. We need you to come in today, as soon as possible." The lab technician's voice sounded tense. Aisha felt her heart skip a beat. She made an appointment for an hour later and began to get dressed with trembling hands. In the lab, she was met by Dr. Harris, the department head, whom she had only seen a couple of times. His presence heightened her anxiety. They went into a small office where her medical file was lying on the desk. "Aisha, please sit down," Dr. Harris said, pointing to a chair. "I'm afraid I have some bad news. Your HIV test came back positive." The room spun before her eyes. Aisha clung to the armrests of the chair, trying to cope with the dizziness. "This is impossible. There must be a mistake." "We ran a second test," the doctor continued, as if reading her mind. The result was confirmed. Judging by the indicators, the infection occurred relatively recently, within the last 6 months. 6 months. Aisha frantically tried to remember everyone she had been in contact with during that time. Jamal had always used protection, and they had both been careful. That left only, "I need to talk to your sexual partners." The doctor's voice sounded muffled. "It's standard procedure. They need to be tested." Aisha nodded, unable to say a word. How would she tell Jamal? And Malik? Oh God, Malik. Their last meeting had been just a month ago, after another argument with her father. They had both had too much to drink and... "You need to start therapy immediately." Dr. Harris handed her several brochures. "Modern medications allow you to live a full life. The main thing is not to waste time." The next few hours passed in a blur. Aisha mechanically filled out forms, answered questions, and received referrals to specialists. When she finally left the hospital, the sun was already setting. Her first impulse was to call Malik, but she couldn't bring herself to do it. Instead, Aisha got into her car and just drove wherever her eyes took her. When she found herself in a parking lot by Lake Erie, she turned off the engine and burst into tears. Her phone was ringing off the hook. Jamal had already left 5 messages asking where she was and why she wasn't answering. Her work must have noticed she was gone. But what scared Aisha the most was the missed call from Malik. Gathering her strength, she dialed his number. He answered on the first ring. "Aisha, what happened? Jamal called my father and said you were missing. Malik, we need to talk. Urgently, where are you?" "At the office. What's going on? You're scaring me." "Come to the parking lot by the lighthouse. I'll wait there." Half an hour later, Malik's black BMW pulled up next to her Honda. He got out of the car, and Aisha saw the concern on his face. She gestured for him to get in. "I have HIV," she blurted out as soon as he closed the door. Malik froze, staring at her with wide eyes. He was silent for a few seconds, then slowly shook his head. "No, that's not possible." "The tests confirmed it, twice." Aisha sobbed. "I was infected in the last 6 months. Malik, you have to get tested." "Wait," he raised his hand. "You think it's me? Aisha, I'm healthy. I don't have HIV. How do you know? Have you been tested?" "Yes, I mean, not specifically for HIV, but I get tested regularly. A general checkup, you know?" "A general checkup doesn't include an HIV test unless you specifically ask for it." Aisha felt anger rising inside her. "Malik, don't lie to me. If you knew—" "I didn't know." He raised his voice. "God, Aisha, do you really think I would put you at risk? I love you." "Then how did I get it? Jamal always uses protection. That leaves only you." Malik ran his hand over his face, trying to collect his thoughts. "Maybe Jamal isn't as careful as you think? Or, damn it, I don't know, but it wasn't me, I swear." "You still need to get tested." Aisha wiped away her tears. "And tell all your partners." "What partners?" "Aisha, I haven't been with anyone but you for a year." She looked at him suspiciously. Malik had always been popular with women, and the idea of him abstaining seemed unbelievable. "Please, just get tested," she asked wearily. "I need to know." "Okay. First thing in the morning. But what will you tell Jamal?" "The truth. What else can I say?" "What about us?" "What?" Aisha closed her eyes. After the scene at the birthday party, Jamal already suspected their relationship. Now, with this diagnosis, there was no point in hiding anything. "I don't know. Everything is falling apart, Malik, my whole life." He reached out to hug her, but Aisha pulled away. "Don't. Please, just get tested." When she returned home, Aisha found Jamal sitting on the porch of her apartment. He jumped up when he saw her. "Where were you? I was so worried." "Jamal, we need to talk." Aisha opened the door, letting him inside. She told him everything, leaving out the details about Malik. Jamal listened silently, his face hardening with every word. "I'll take the test," he said finally. "But Aisha, I've always used protection. Always. Are you sure there was no one else?" She didn't answer, looking away. Jamal understood without words. "It's him, isn't it? Your stepbrother?" "Jamal, don't deny it. I saw how you looked at each other. How long has this been going on?" "About a year," Aisha admitted. "We tried to stop, really, but what? But you couldn't resist the forbidden fruit? God, Aisha, he's your brother." "Stepbrother. We're not related by blood." "As if that makes any difference." Jamal jumped up from the sofa. "You betrayed me, with a member of your own family, and now you have HIV, which you could have passed on to me." "I'm so sorry," Aisha whispered. "I didn't want it to happen." "I'm leaving." Jamal headed for the door. "I'll get tested and let you know the results. And then we'll decide what to do next." Left alone, Aisha collapsed onto the couch. The phone rang again. This time it was Darnell. She didn't answer. How could she explain to her stepfather what was going on? How could she tell him about the disease, about the betrayal, about how she had destroyed their family? The next morning, Malik sent a message. "I took the test. The results will be in 2 days." Aisha didn't reply. She didn't know if she even wanted to know the truth. Jamal also took the test and sent a terse message. "Waiting for the results. I hope you understand that it's over between us." By evening, Darnell found out about the situation. It is not known who told him, Jamal or someone from the hospital. But he arrived at Aisha's house unannounced. Is it true? He asked from the doorway. Do you have HIV? Aisha nodded, unable to look him in the eye. My God, Darnell sank into a chair. How did this happen? You're a doctor, you should have been more careful. Dad, And Jamal said something about Malik. What did he mean? Aisha remained silent. Darnell looked at her, and understanding slowly dawned on his face. No, he whispered. Not that. Tell me it's not true. I'm so sorry, Aisha cried. We didn't mean for it to happen. It just did. Darnell stood up, swaying. His face was gray. His hands were shaking. I raised you as my own children. I gave you everything. And you did this to me? Dad, please, don't you dare call me Dad, he exploded. You're not my daughter anymore, and Malik is no longer my son. I never want to see you again, ever. He stormed out, slamming the door behind him. Aisha remained seated, frozen in shock. In 2 days, her life had been turned to ruins. Her health, her relationships, her family, everything had collapsed like a house of cards. The morning of October 25th was unusually cold for Cleveland. Helen Murray, the Thompsons' housekeeper, arrived at work at 8 o'clock as usual. After parking her old Toyota in the driveway, she noticed that the garage door was closed, even though Mr. Thompson usually left for the office by 7. Entering the house through the back door, Helen was surprised by the unusual silence. Usually by this time, Darnell was already having breakfast in the kitchen, watching the morning news on his tablet. But today the kitchen was empty, and the coffee maker was off. Going upstairs, she knocked on the master bedroom door. There was no answer. Opening the door slightly, Helen saw that the bed had not been made. Mr. Thompson had not slept there. It was strange, but not alarming. Perhaps he had stayed with a friend after yesterday's argument with the children. Going back downstairs, Helen decided to check the garage. Sometimes Mr. Thompson stayed there late, sorting through his collection of antique watches. She pressed the button for the automatic gate on the kitchen wall. The mechanism hummed, and the gate slowly slid upward. Helen's scream echoed throughout the neighborhood. In the garage, lit by the dim light of a single bulb, stood 2 cars, Malik's black BMW and Aisha's silver Honda. The engines of both cars were running, exhaust fumes filling the room with a gray haze. Malik's silhouette was visible behind the wheel of the BMW, his head slumped lifelessly on his chest. Aisha was sitting in the Honda, leaning back against the headrest. Helen ran out into the street, gasping for air. With trembling hands, she dialed 911. 15 minutes later, the quiet, prestigious neighborhood was filled with the wail of sirens. The patrol cars arrived first, followed by ambulances and fire trucks. When it became clear that help had come too late, forensic experts and detectives were called to the scene. Detective Amara Jackson arrived at the scene at 9:30. A tall woman with short hair and piercing brown eyes, she had been working in the Cleveland Homicide Department for 15 years. Her partner, Detective Michael Chen, joined her at the yellow crime scene tape. What do we have? Jackson asked, pulling on latex gloves. 2 bodies in the garage. Preliminary cause of death, carbon monoxide poisoning. The victims are Malik Thompson, 32, and Aisha Williams Thompson, 28, their stepbrother and sister. Jackson frowned. Thompson? That's the family of Darnell Thompson, right? The car dealership owner? That's right. The house belongs to him, but he hasn't been here for the last few days. According to the housekeeper, there was a serious family dispute. They entered the garage, where forensic experts were already photographing the scene. Both cars were turned off and the bodies remained in place, awaiting the medical examiner. At first glance, it looks like suicide, Chen remarked. The classic method is carbon monoxide poisoning in an enclosed space. Jackson approached the BMW. Malik was sitting in the driver's seat, strapped in by his seatbelt. An envelope lay on the passenger seat. Putting on double gloves, the detective carefully picked it up. A suicide note? Chen suggested. Jackson opened the envelope and took out a folded piece of paper. The handwriting was uneven, as if the writer had been in a hurry or nervous. Dad, forgive us. We didn't want it to turn out this way. Our love was a mistake, and now Aisha is sick because of me. We don't see any other way out. Please don't blame yourself. Malik. Sick? Jackson turned to her partner. Find out at the hospital what the girl was suffering from. While Chen called the medical facility, Jackson went over to the Honda. Aisha was sitting in the driver's seat, also wearing a seatbelt. Her cell phone was on her lap. Next to her on the seat was an empty wine bottle and a package of sleeping pills. Maybe she took the pills to fall asleep and not feel suffocated, Jackson suggested. Chen returned with new information. The hospital confirmed that Aisha Williams Thompson was recently diagnosed with HIV. She found out 3 days ago. A motive for suicide, Jackson nodded. Illness, shame, a broken family. Where's the father? At that moment, a black Cadillac pulled into the yard. Darnell Thompson got out, a tall man in an expensive suit, his face contorted with grief and rage. "What's going on here?" he shouted, trying to break through the cordon. "Where are my children?" Jackson approached him. "Mr. Thompson, I'm Detective Jackson. I'm very sorry, but your son and stepdaughter are dead." Darnell staggered. A patrolman caught him by the arm, helping him to his feet. "How?" he croaked. "Presumed suicide. Carbon monoxide poisoning. Mr. Thompson, when was the last time you saw the children?" 2 days ago. We had an argument. I found out about their relationship and about Aisha's illness. I told them I didn't want to see them." "Where were you last night?" Darnell looked up. "Are you suspecting me? They were my children?" "It's a standard question, sir. We need to establish a timeline." "I was at the Ritz-Carlton. I booked a room the day before yesterday after the argument. You can check." At that moment, another car pulled up to the house. Jamal King got out. Seeing the police cars and the ambulance, he turned pale. "What happened? Where's Aisha?" Jackson intercepted him as he approached. "Are you Jamal King, Aisha Williams Thompson's ex-fiancé?" "Yes. What's going on?" "Mr. King, Aisha is dead. So is her brother Malik." Jamal froze, processing what he had heard. Then his face contorted into a strange mixture of shock and something resembling relief. "Did they kill themselves?" he asked quietly. "Why do you think that?" "After what happened, Aisha was desperate, and Malik felt guilty." "Guilty of what?" "Of everything. Of their relationship, of infecting her." Jackson perked up. "How do you know it was Malik who infected her?" Jamal hesitated. "Well, it's obvious. I always used protection, and they— Where were you last night, Mr. King?" "At home, alone, working on reports for the pharmacy." "Can anyone confirm that?" "No, I live alone." Jackson made a note in her notebook. Something about both men's behavior was alarming. Darnell seemed genuinely shocked, but his reaction was too controlled for someone who had just lost his children. Jamal, on the other hand, looked nervous, as if he was expecting something to happen. Back in the garage, Jackson carefully examined the scene. Something wasn't right. She crouched down next to the BMW, looking at the floor. "Chen, look here," she called to her partner. There were strange scratches on the concrete floor, as if something heavy had been dragged toward the car. "Traces of a struggle?" Chen suggested. "Or someone dragging an unconscious body." They moved over to the Honda. Jackson noticed that Aisha's body looked unnatural. Her head was lying too flat on the headrest, her arms neatly folded on her knees. "They're posing," she muttered. "What?" "People who poison themselves with carbon monoxide usually lose consciousness in more natural positions. These bodies look like they've been laid out." The forensic technician approached them with a new discovery. "Detective, we found this under Malik's car." He handed her a plastic evidence bag containing a syringe. "Any idea what was in it?" Jackson asked. "We'll send it in for analysis, but it looks like the remains of a sleeping pill, the same as in the bottle the girl had." Jackson nodded. The picture was starting to come together, but not as it had initially seemed. "Chen, check the surveillance footage in the area. See who came here last night." "You don't think it was suicide?" "Too many loose ends. The suicide note is only addressed to Malik. Why didn't Aisha leave one for herself? Why would they both need sleeping pills if they were going to poison themselves with gas? And those marks on the floor?" The medical examiner finished his preliminary examination of the bodies and called Jackson over. "Time of death is between midnight and 3 a.m., but there's something interesting. Both of them have injection marks on their necks, fresh ones." "Sleeping pills?" "Possibly. But it's strange that the injection was made in the neck. People usually inject themselves in the arm or thigh." Jackson looked at the peaceful faces of the victims. Now she was sure it wasn't suicide. Someone had drugged them, put them in the cars, and started the engines. Someone who knew about their secret and Aisha's illness. Someone who had a motive to get rid of both of them. She went out to the courtyard, where Darnell and Jamal were giving statements to various officers. Both looked depressed, but in different ways. Darnell seemed broken with grief, Jamal tense and alert. "This is murder," Jackson said quietly to her partner. "And the killer is one of them." The atmosphere at the station was tense. Detective Amara Jackson laid out crime scene photos, forensic reports, and initial witness statements on the conference room table. Her partner, Detective Michael Chen, studied surveillance footage from nearby houses. "Look," Chen pointed to the laptop screen. At 11:45 p.m., Malik's BMW pulls up to the house. He parks in the garage. 20 minutes later, Aisha's Honda arrives. "So they agreed to meet." Jackson frowned. "But why? After everything that happened?" At that moment, an officer entered with a folder of documents. "Detective, we got a search warrant for the victim's apartments. We found something interesting." Jackson opened the folder. Inside were printouts of emails between Malik and Aisha, dated over the last 6 months. The correspondence was intimate, leaving no doubt as to the nature of their relationship. "Malik, I can't live like this anymore. Every time we meet, I feel guilty towards Jamal, towards my father." "I know, my love. But we can't control our feelings. Let's run away. Start over somewhere where no one knows us. What about our careers, our family? We can't just abandon everything." Jackson flipped through the pages. The last letters were written after Aisha found out about her diagnosis. "Malik, I have HIV. I don't know how it happened. You need to get tested." "That's impossible. I'm healthy." "Maybe it's Jamal? He always used protection. That leaves only you." "Aisha, I swear I didn't know. If it's true, I won't survive." The next document made Jackson hold her breath. It was Malik's test results dated 3 days ago. The HIV test was negative. He wasn't infected. Jackson turned to Chen. "So he didn't infect Aisha. Then who did?" There was a knock at the door. The lab technician entered with the preliminary results of the toxicology report. "Detective, we found high doses of propofol in the blood of both victims. It's a powerful sedative used in surgery." "Enough to put them to sleep?" "More than enough. At that dose, a person loses consciousness in seconds." Jackson thought for a moment. "Propofol isn't sold in regular pharmacies. We need access to medical supplies." "Jamal is a pharmacist," Chen reminded her. "And Aisha is a doctor. She could have had access too." They returned to examining the evidence. In Aisha's apartment, they found her diary, the last entry of which was made on the day of her death. "I can't live with this secret anymore. Malik isn't to blame, but I can't tell him the truth. Jamal will destroy us both if he finds out. Dad will never forgive me. Maybe death is the only way out." "Sounds like a suicide note," Chen remarked. "Or like something someone wanted us to think was a suicide note," Jackson objected. "The handwriting is shaky, as if she was writing under pressure." The next few hours were spent in intense interrogations. Darnell Thompson was called in first. He looked 10 years older, his eyes red from crying. "Mr. Thompson, tell us about your relationship with the children," Jackson began. "They were everything to me. After my wife died, Malik withdrew into himself. When I married Aisha's mother, I hoped the children would become friends. They did. Too close." "When did you find out about their relationship?" 3 days ago. Jamal called and said Aisha was HIV positive and had been cheating on him with Malik. I didn't believe him, so I went to Aisha. She confirmed everything. "How did you react?" "I was furious. I told them they were dead to me. I went to a hotel. I haven't seen them since." "Do you have access to medication?" Darnell frowned. "No. Why would I? You think I killed my own children? We're looking into all possibilities. Where were you between midnight and 3 a.m.? "At the hotel. I ordered room service around 1 a.m. You can check." After Darnell, Jamal King was questioned. He was nervous, constantly fiddling with his shirt cuffs. "Mr. King, you work in a pharmacy. Do you have access to propofol?" Jamal turned pale. "Theoretically, yes, but I've never—" "Did you know that Aisha had HIV?" "Yes, she told me 3 days ago." And you immediately decided that Malik was to blame? Who else? I always use protection. I got tested. Negative. Were you very angry with both of them? Of course. They betrayed me. But I didn't kill them. Where were you last night? At home, working on the quarterly report for the pharmacy. Any witnesses? No. I live alone since I broke up with Aisha. Jackson took out a photo of the syringe found under Malik's car. Do you recognize this syringe? Jamal looked closely at the photo. It's a standard medical syringe. You can find them in any hospital or pharmacy. Including yours? Yes, but... Thank you, Mr. King. You're free to go, but don't leave town. After he left, Jackson and Chen discussed the testimony. They both have a motive, Chen said. Darnell is a disappointed father. Jamal is a devoted fiancé. And they both have shaky alibis, Jackson added. But something's bothering me. If Malik wasn't infected, how did Aisha get HIV? Just then, the medical examiner called. Detective Jackson? I have the preliminary autopsy results. In addition to propofol, traces of antiretroviral drugs were found in Aisha's blood. Was she undergoing treatment for HIV? No, these drugs are usually used for prevention after possible contact with the virus. And also, there are old injection marks on her body. Not medical in nature. What do you mean? They look like marks from intravenous drug use. About a year old. Jackson thanked the pathologist and hung up. The picture was becoming increasingly confusing. Was Aisha using drugs? Chen asked in surprise. There's nothing like that in her history. Maybe she was hiding it, or someone was giving her drugs without her knowledge. They returned to studying Aisha's medical records. In her hospital records, they found a year-old entry about her being hospitalized for an overdose of an unknown substance. At the time, she claimed that someone had slipped a drug into her drink at a bar. Who was with her that night? Jackson asked. Chen checked the report. Jamal. He brought her to the hospital. Interesting. What if... She was interrupted by a call. The officer checking the surveillance footage had found something important. Detective, you need to see this. An hour before Malik arrived at the Thompsons' house, another car pulled up. A blue sedan, no license plate visible. Was anyone there before them? It looks like it. The car left 20 minutes later, just before Malik arrived. Jackson felt the pieces of the puzzle start to fall into place. She had a theory, but she needed more evidence to confirm it. Chen, check all the pharmacies where Jamal has worked in the last 2 years. Pay special attention to any missing medications. You think he's involved? I have a hunch this story started long before we thought, and Jamal knows more than he's letting on. She looked at the photos of Malik and Aisha. Young, beautiful, full of life. Their secret romance had been the catalyst for the tragedy, but the real reasons for their deaths ran much deeper. Jackson spent the rest of the day gathering information about the past of everyone involved in the drama. By evening, she had a preliminary picture of what had happened, but she was missing a few key details to draw any final conclusions. She knew that tomorrow would be the most important interrogation of her career, the one that would reveal the truth about the double murder and show which of the two suspects, the loving father or the betrayed fiancé, had become a murderer. Early in the morning, the Cleveland police station was unusually busy. Detective Amara Jackson sat at her desk, reviewing surveillance footage from cameras near the Thompsons' house. Something about the statements of both suspects bothered her. Chen rushed into the office holding a printout. Amara, look at this. An ATM camera caught a blue sedan 2 blocks from the Thompsons' house at 1:15 a.m. Jackson studied the blurry image. The license plate is unclear, but the model is the same as the one mentioned in the case of the missing drugs from Jamal's pharmacy. She called the rental company. After half an hour of waiting and checking, it was confirmed. The blue sedan had been rented by Jamal King the day before the murder. He lied to us. Jackson tapped her pen on the table. He said he was home all night. At the same time, a report arrived from the Ritz-Carlton Hotel. Video footage confirmed that Darnell had indeed been in the hotel lobby around midnight and had ordered food to his room at 1:15 a.m. The concierge remembered him because Mr. Thompson looked depressed and drunk. Darnell's alibi is confirmed, Chen summarized. That leaves Jamal. Jackson reread the medical examiner's report. High concentrations of propofol, a surgical anesthetic that cannot be purchased without a prescription, were found in the blood of both victims. "Call the pharmacies where Jamal worked," she ordered. "Check all cases of propofol missing." While Chen was doing that, Jackson studied the crime scene report. The experts had found several oddities. First, microscopic traces of rubber from the soles of shoes that did not match the victim's shoes were found on the garage floor. Second, the position of the bodies looked unnaturally neat. Their arms were folded, their heads tilted back at the same angle. Third, analysis of the suicide note showed that it had been typed, not handwritten as originally assumed. Chen returned with news. Of the 3 pharmacies where Jamal worked, 2 reported propofol missing. The last case was a week before the murder. Jackson nodded. "Call him in for questioning right now." An hour later, Jamal sat in the interrogation room, nervously fingering his shirt cuffs. Jackson placed a photo of a blue sedan in front of him. "Mr. King, why did you lie about your whereabouts on the night of the murder?" Jamal turned pale. I was upset. I had too much to drink. I decided to go for a drive. Past the house where your ex-fiancée and her lover were meeting? That's a coincidence." Jackson opened the next folder. "Propofol has been missing from the pharmacies where you worked, the same drug that was found in the victim's blood. I have nothing to do with that. Mr. King, we have video footage of your car near the Thompsons' house. There is confirmation that propofol was missing from the pharmacy where you work. There is a motive, jealousy and betrayal. What else are you hiding?" Jamal remained silent, staring at the table. At that moment, an officer entered with a new report. "Detective, the lab has finished analyzing the syringe found under the car. Partial fingerprints were found on it." "Whose?" "They haven't been identified yet, but they're in the database. We need time for a full analysis." After the officer left, Jackson continued the interrogation. "Tell me about Aisha's overdose a year ago." Jamal flinched. "It was an accident. Someone slipped something into her drink." "Interesting. The medical report says you brought her to the hospital. Very convenient to be there at that moment." "I just happened to be there." Jackson took out another document. "We checked your finances. A year ago you took out a large loan. Around the same time, you started having problems at work. Debts at the poker club. Aisha came from a wealthy family, correct?" "It's not what you think." "What do I think? That you used her? That you tried to control her when she wanted to leave?" The silence in the interrogation room became almost palpable. Jackson opened the last folder. "We have the results of Aisha's blood test. Do you know what we found? Traces of antiretroviral drugs used to prevent HIV. She had been taking them for about a year. It's as if she knew she was at risk." Jamal clenched his fists. "Mr. King, when did you find out about your HIV status?" The question caught him off guard. "What? We requested your medical records. You were diagnosed a year ago. You started treatment but didn't tell Aisha. Why?" Silence. "Did you want to infect her? Tie her to you through disease?" "That's crazy," Jamal exploded. "You have no proof." There was a knock at the door. A technician from the lab entered. "Detective, we've finished analyzing the fingerprints on the syringe. They belong to Mr. King." Jamal leaned back in his chair as if the air had been let out of him. "Last chance to tell the truth," Jackson warned. Jamal stared into space. Finally, he spoke in a quiet, lifeless voice. "I found out about their relationship 6 months ago. I followed Aisha, saw her meeting with Malik. At first, I couldn't believe it. My own brother. Then I realized I was losing her." "And what did you do?" "Nothing, just waited. I knew that sooner or later the truth would come out, and then Aisha got her test results." "You knew she would get infected?" "I hoped she wouldn't. I was undergoing treatment. The viral load was low, but you didn't warn her about the risk. She was cheating on me, with my brother. I had a right." "A right to what? To revenge?" Jamal fell silent. Jackson knew he was on the verge of confessing, but he needed one last push. "What happened on the night of the murder, Jamal? You were there, weren't you?" He nodded. "I wanted to talk to Malik, demand that he leave Aisha alone. I drove to the house, but it was dark. I decided to wait in the garage. And? Malik arrived first, then Aisha. They were arguing about something. I listened. Malik said his HIV test was negative. Aisha was in shock. That meant I had infected her. What happened next? I don't remember exactly. My mind went blank. I only remember taking out the syringe with propofol. I just wanted to put them to sleep, scare them. But then you decided to kill them." Jamal covered his face with his hands. "They ruined everything. My life, my plans. I loved Aisha, and she chose him, her own brother. How did you do it?" I snuck up behind them while they were arguing. First, I stabbed Malik in the neck. He fell almost instantly. Aisha screamed, but I managed to get her too. Then I put them in the cars, started the engines. And the suicide note? I typed it up beforehand. I knew Malik's handwriting. I'd seen his documents at Aisha's house. I wanted everyone to think it was a double suicide. Jackson nodded. The puzzle was complete. All that remained was to get a confession and take the case to court. "Mr. King, are you ready to sign the confession?" Jamal raised his head. There was no remorse in his eyes, only anger and resentment. "They got what they deserved," he hissed. "Both of them." Jackson stood up. "Jamal King, you are under arrest on suspicion of double murder. You will be formally charged once all the paperwork has been completed. You have the right to an attorney." She left the interrogation room, leaving Jamal under the supervision of the officers. Chen was waiting for her in the hallway. "Great job," he said. "But how did you figure out about the HIV?" "Aisha's medical records. She started taking preventive medication a year ago, right after that strange overdose. I think she suspected Jamal was sick, but couldn't prove it. And he killed her when the truth came out. Not just that. He lost control. Aisha was slipping away from him, choosing someone else. For a man like Jamal, that was unbearable." Jackson looked through the glass at Jamal's hunched figure. The mystery had been solved, but the tragedy remained. 2 young lives had been cut short by a sick obsession and a twisted understanding of love. The arrest ceremony went off without incident. Jamal King was officially charged with double first-degree murder, illegal possession of controlled substances, and intentional transmission of HIV. As the officers cuffed him, he kept a stony expression on his face. At a press conference, Detective Jackson detailed the chronology of events. It all began more than a year ago when Jamal learned of his HIV-positive status. Instead of warning his partner, he continued to have unprotected sex, hoping to bind Aisha to him through their shared illness. At the same time, he got into debt due to his gambling addiction. Aisha seemed like the perfect solution to his financial problems, a young doctor from a wealthy family. But when she began to distance herself, spending more and more time with Malik, Jamal decided to take action. First, he tried to blackmail her, threatening to reveal the secret of her relationship with his brother. When that didn't work, he staged an overdose, hoping to elicit pity and gratitude. But Aisha only distanced herself even more. The final straw was the news of her HIV status. Jamal realized he was losing control completely. Aisha would find out the truth, Malik would support her, and Jamal would be left with nothing. So he devised a murder plan that was supposed to look like a tragic suicide of 2 lovers. The criminal used his professional position to gain access to propofol, Jackson explained to reporters. He planned the crime meticulously, rented a car, and prepared a fake suicide note. On the night of the murder, he waited for his victims in the garage, sedated them with propofol injections, then put them in the cars and started the engines. A separate investigation was launched into the deliberate transmission of HIV. It emerged that Jamal had not only concealed his diagnosis from Aisha, but had also deliberately sabotaged her attempts to protect herself by tampering with her contraceptives. The trial lasted 3 months. Jamal did not admit guilt, claiming that he acted in the heat of the moment. His lawyer tried to build a defense based on temporary insanity caused by the betrayal of his beloved woman. However, the prosecution presented irrefutable evidence of careful planning of the crime. The jury returned a verdict of guilty on all counts. The judge sentenced Jamal King to 2 life sentences without the possibility of parole, plus an additional 20 years for intentionally infecting someone with HIV. Darnell Thompson attended every court hearing. Over the months, he seemed to have aged 20 years. After the verdict was announced, he gave his only interview to a local newspaper. "I lost everything. My son, my daughter, my faith in people. My last conversation with my children was full of anger and condemnation. Now I understand that their relationship however wrong it may have seemed, was based on real feelings. What this man did was pure evil. 6 months after the trial, Darnell sold his business and moved to Florida. With the proceeds, he established a charitable foundation to help victims of domestic violence and people living with HIV. The foundation was named after Malik and Aisha Thompson. On the anniversary of the tragedy, Detective Jackson visited the victims' graves. They were buried side by side, just as they had lived their last months together, despite all social conventions. Their names and dates of birth and death were engraved on the gravestones. Under Aisha's name was written, "Beloved daughter and sister." Under Malik's name, "Beloved son and brother." There was no mention of the tragedy, only a memory of who they were to their loved ones. Jackson laid flowers on both graves. During her years on the police force, she had seen many crimes, but this case left a particularly deep mark on her. It reminded her that behind every murder, there is a whole network of human relationships, secrets, and tragedies. When she returned to the station, she found a letter from Darnell on her desk. He thanked her for solving the crime and invited her to the opening of the Foundation's first help center. At the end of the letter was a postscript. "I've thought a lot about what happened. My children loved each other, maybe not in the way society expects, but they loved each other sincerely. They didn't do anything wrong to anyone except break a social taboo, and the man who claimed to love my daughter turned out to be a monster. It made me rethink a lot of things in my life." Jackson kept the letter. It became a reminder to her that in detective work, it is important not only to solve crimes, but also to understand human nature in all its complexity. Jamal King was serving his sentence in a maximum security prison. He regularly wrote letters to various people, including Jackson, claiming that he was the victim of injustice. All his attempts to appeal his sentence were rejected. 2 years after the murder, an incident occurred in prison. Jamal's cellmates discovered that he was deliberately infecting people with HIV. He was found beaten in the shower. He survived, but spent the rest of his sentence in solitary confinement for his own safety. The story of Malik and Aisha became known far beyond Cleveland. Books were written about them, and a documentary was made. Public opinion was divided. Some condemned their relationship, while others saw them as victims of circumstances and prejudice. Detective Jackson continued to work in the homicide department. The Thompson case taught her an important lesson. Sometimes the most terrible crimes are committed under the guise of love, and not always those who break social norms turn out to be real criminals. In her lectures to police academy cadets, she often cited the case as an example of how important it is to look beyond the obvious. "Don't judge by first impressions," she would say. "Dig deeper. The truth is often more complicated than it seems." 5 years after the tragedy, the Thompson Foundation opened 10 help centers across the country. Darnell was personally involved in each one. He never remarried, dedicating his life to the memory of his children. At an annual conference on domestic violence prevention, he said, "We often fail to see the real monsters because they are skilled at masking themselves as loving partners. My children did not die because of their feelings for each other, but because of the obsession of a man who believed that love was his property." Detective Jackson was invited to the conference as a guest of honor. After Darnell's speech, she approached him. They talked for a long time about the past and how the tragedy had changed them both. "You know what I've realized?" Darnell said. "Love is never wrong. Only the actions we take in the name of love are wrong." These words became the Foundation's motto and were engraved on a memorial plaque in the first open help center. The Thompson case was included in criminology textbooks as an example of how personal obsession can lead to tragedy. It also sparked discussions about the nature of love, family relationships, and the limits of what is acceptable in society. For Detective Jackson, the case remained a constant reminder of the fragility of human life and that dark secrets often lurk behind a facade of prosperity. She continued to solve crimes, but now she always remembered that the truth is rarely simple and that love and hate often go hand in hand. In her office, in a prominent place, stood a framed photograph of Malik and Aisha smiling at a family celebration, taken a few months before the tragedy. It was a reminder that behind every case, there are real people with their hopes, fears, and dreams. We can't change the past, Jackson told her young colleagues, but we can learn from the mistakes of others and try to prevent similar tragedies in the future.